Yeah, looks like we have a few more people still
Yeah.
filing back in.
Okay, so I think we're going to start. So welcome back, everybody. I think there's a few people missing, but hopefully they'll come back soon. So first of all, I'd like to welcome David Menashri. Excuse me. So I'd like to welcome David Menashri and Leah Soibel. David will be speaking on, the title of his talk is Iran, Israel, and Anti-Semitism. David is the founding director of the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv University, and he's the professor emeritus of Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv, and a longtime friend. So nice to see you back, David. I haven't seen you for a while. Good to see you. And Leah Soibel will be speaking. She's the founder and CEO of Fuente Latina. It's an organization dealing with anti-Semitism in the Spanish-speaking world, I guess. She'll tell you more. And the topic, the title of her talk is How Media Targeting Spanish Speakers is Fueling Anti-Semitism. But I think what's more important is Leah is actually it's a special honor for us. This lecture, and I'd like to thank, I can't see him, Ray Shinazi is here, and thanks to his generous contribution and help, we're very honored to make this talk of Leah's. It's a memorial lecture in honor of William Prusoff. William Prusoff played a key role in the establishment and founding of ISGAP. I'm very honored that Alvin and Laura Prusoff are here. William's children, kids are here. And the Family Foundation, the William Prusoff Foundation has helped to sustain the work of ISGAP for many years. It's been coming on about 18 years or so. And the Prusoffs have been involved in the work of ISGAP and helped to keep us going during good and bad times. And it's particularly an honor for us at ISGAP that we're doing this special lecture. William Prusoff, as I was saying, played an instrumental role in the establishment of ISGAP. He grew up in Brooklyn and he witnessed local brown shirts, Nazis. Steve Ross was speaking about Nazis in the United States. And William Bill Prusoff had firsthand experience with this. His family actually left New York and Brooklyn and Nazis and went to Miami to get away from it. He lived in Miami and he was not able to attend high-ranking universities because of Jewish quotas, but eventually went on to do studies at the University of Miami. And despite being rejected at Yale University, he eventually got a job as a leading pharmacologist at Yale and spent many decades working at Yale and helped to develop, and Ray, I hope I'm not messing this up, but he helped to establish with Ray antiviral medications that played a key role in helping to save many people, prolong their lives during the AIDS crisis. And on a personal level, Bill was a true gentleman. He was happy, joking, always positive. I remember the days at Yale, he'd bring his lunch to school to go to his lab, and he would take his brown paper bag of lunch and sit with, could be the president of the university to the cleaning staff of the university. He was just a very humble, incredible, supportive mensch. And I actually wrote in one of the books that we've published that he was really a tzaddik. He was really a very special, positive man. So it's really an honor that we're able to do this memorial lecture for Bill Prusoff and the Prusoff family. And unfortunately, it's sort of virtual, but we hope this will be the beginning of an annual lecture in his honor. And he not only supported the work of ISGAP, but was very generous and supported many causes, medical causes, social causes, and was a kind, supportive, humble man. So it's a special lecture. So on that important note, I'd like to give Leah the floor. And please, you can speak for about 20, 25 minutes, and then give David the floor and we can have a Q&A. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Charles. And thank you to the Prisco family. Thank you all. I am a big fan of ISGAP's work, working in the field of anti-Semitism in the media, not only Spanish language media, but in different languages over the last 16 years. We support the work of ISGAP and we understand the importance of it. And for me, being a first-time speaker at an ISGAP conference, and it's for such a special lecture, and thank you for providing some of the background on William and having his family here. And I want to say very briefly a very special gracias to Dr. Raymond Shinazi and Tavi Udai, who helped facilitate my appearance today here. So gracias to everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I'm gonna dive right in. I'm not gonna, I was an academic in my previous life and now I'm a pragmatic realist working day to day in the mainstream media with the top media outlets and journalists around the world and witnessing firsthand on the front lines what is anti-Semitism in the media and particularly in the Spanish language media. And I think that we can all safely say, without referencing any academic works, that there is a direct link between negative media coverage of Israel and the Jews and rising sentiments or acting on those sentiments of anti-Semitism, of violence, anti-Semitism that we're seeing. And I wanna give a special case of what's happening in the Spanish-speaking world and why it matters. And I think to give a little bit of context of why it matters in the Spanish-speaking world is because if you don't know the statistics, Spanish is the second or third, depending on which statistics you consult, the second or third most spoken language in the world. There are an estimated 500 million Spanish speakers worldwide, and they predominantly are in Latin America, the United States, and in Spain. And the United States particularly is considered the second largest Spanish-speaking country after Mexico. So we're not only focusing on what is happening in anti-Semitic Spanish language media in Latin America or Spain for that matter, but also the United States, because the United States has a very growing and very influential Latino population, which in years to come, we're going to see is going to have a major impact and importance on the future of US-Israel relations. I'm going to show some slides because I really want to illustrate the importance of what I'm talking about, the severity of what I'm talking about. So assuming I have ability here to share, which I do. So bottom line, when it comes to the Spanish language media, and again, 500 million Spanish speakers worldwide, these aren't small numbers. These are very, very large numbers. And the potential to sway Hispanics from one, whether it's towards anti-Semitism, against Israel, or for one way or another, is quite significant. And what we've seen since 2011 has been the rise of state-funded media networks. Now, I could spend hours here with you talking about different journalists that have been anti-Semitic in the Spanish language media, different particular actors, state-funded media in Latin America, particularly from Venezuela or from Argentina, from countries that are less democratic, and therefore we know that their media has been more anti-Semitic and more anti-Israel. But with the, I think, 15 minutes now that I have, I want to focus on a couple really erroneous actors that are having a significant impact on Latino public opinion. So the first thing we have to look at here, and it's a very unfortunate that there aren't academic studies. There really have not been any profound academic research studies on the proliferation of state-funded, external and internal, Spanish language media networks and their impact on anti-Semitism and perceptions of Israel. And our work at Fuente Latina, which is, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that work to facilitate accurate coverage of Israel and the Jewish people throughout the Spanish-speaking world, what we found is that there is very little research to back up what we are seeing in our day-to-day work. And what we're seeing is the rise of these state-funded actors, meaning we have Russia Today, RT in Espanol, and I'm going to talk about them briefly in a moment to just so you can all understand the breadth and the significant investment that Moscow is making in winning and communicating to Hispanics worldwide. Iran in 2011 launched Hispan TV, and they are one of the most evil actors that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to break down exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it, because I want to focus on them. But you also have Qatar. Qatar has launched AJ Plus in Espanol. You have Al-Manar, which is Hezbollah, terrorist organization Hezbollah, Iran funded, Iran backed. It is their own mechanism to communicate their messages to the Spanish-speaking world, and it's through traditional media, such as television, but it's also through print, radio, and now more than ever before, social media. What happened in the Spanish language media is something that we saw also happen in other different language media during the pandemic. And that was a significant shift, literally from one day to the next, from focus on traditional media to digital media, meaning that—
If you don't mind, can you just put it in presentation mode so that we can see the picture a little larger?
I apologize.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
from one day to the next, media outlets were forced to go to social media. They were forced to start increasing their investment and their production of video content, because with all of us in front of our devices 24/7, these outlets made an extreme effort and made significant, I'm talking billion-dollar investments in creating content that was highly anti-Semitic. And we saw this streaming the airwaves and the social media outlets, because we had a particular situation where journalists had to leave their studios from one day to the next and had to learn how to cover news from their sofas. This created an incredible, and still to this day has not been filled, information void, which extremist state-funded actors such as Russia's Today and Iran's Hispan TV filled immediately with the investment of this digital video content. And just so you can understand the amount of views and investment that they're putting into this content, and why are we looking at this? Because Russia Today has 5.8 million followers, and this is only on YouTube. These are not this is not Facebook, and this is not Instagram or TikTok. And ITV is not Israel's state-funded network, but it's kind of the only alternative that Israel has in communicating its messages through mainstream media. Israel does not have an equivalent of Russia Today or Iran's Hispan TV. And so these actors are able to dominate the narrative regarding Jews and Israel because of the investments that they're making in the content that they're producing and the number of views and publicity that they're getting. So Hispan TV, I want to focus on them because they really, I've had the unfortunate reality of actually being side by side with Hispan TV since 2011. I started Fuente Latina in 2012, and we have gone head to head in every instance in our work with mainstream media. And here are just some of the very more recent examples. There are countless examples, but just so you can have an understanding of their narrative as Hispan TV. They started in 2011, and this is 100% state funded by Tehran. And Tehran has put a lot of money and a lot of resources into communicating its messages to the Spanish-speaking world, because they too understand the significance of the Latino world, not only Latin America, but the United States. In Latin America, Hispan TV began just as there was this new budding diplomatic and foreign relationship between Iran and Latin America, particularly in Venezuela, where we started to see President Ahmadinejad at the time and President Chavez had this kind of budding and very public love affair. And while Ahmadinejad was solidifying military, foreign, and other agreements with several Latin American countries, Hispan TV was the way to kind of solidify the diplomatic support at the public opinion ground level. And their tactics and how they communicate and legitimize themselves as a mainstream TV news network is that they first started to develop agreements with networks in Latin America, like Venezuela's state-funded Telesur, and with Argentina's Telam, and with other state-funded networks at the time. And so this was that they were able to share correspondence and content while investing and building up their bureaus, contracting correspondence, getting agreements and contracts with satellite providers to be able to build themselves up as an international 24/7 television news network that they are today. Here are some of the very simple, classic type of messages and narratives that they communicate through their contact, through their content. And this is more recently related to COVID, as they were able to fuel anti-Semitism. So one of the headlines here was America and Israel waged large-scale biological warfare. And when the racial riots were happening in the United States, they spent a significant amount of time on social media, building the narrative of who cries for George Floyd. The world cries for George Floyd, but who cries for the assassinated Palestinians? And they were also spending a lot of time disseminating content saying that the coronavirus was a Zionist plot. Now, why is this significant? Because Hispan TV was able to legitimize themselves, and I'll explain very briefly how that happened. So much so that because of the crisis in journalism, or the lack of resources, a lack of journalists, and necessity to publish as much as possible in as little time as possible, mainstream outlets in Latin America, we discovered little by little started to see Hispan TV as a legitimate international television news network like CNN. And they would copy and paste, still to this day, Hispan TV content without realizing who was the source of this content and that the content was in fact inaccurate. So very briefly to understand Hispan TV. So this is a former Spanish deputy prime minister. Actually, he just recently, Pablo Iglesias, he recently resigned from politics, but as he was starting to become a rising political star, Hispan TV, just as they were starting out in Spain, before they were kicked off Spanish airwaves, hired Pablo Iglesias to run his own show, of which on many of the debates were centered around bashing Jews in Israel. He was a key source in allowing Hispan TV to legitimize themselves in an intellectual Spanish-speaking audience. Moving forward, also Hispan TV hired legitimate journalists. Here is a Mexican journalist who won several awards, helped Hispan TV win several journalistic awards, named Roberto de la Madrid. He actually, a couple years ago, ended up moving to Iran. In the several instances where Hispan TV was actually taken off YouTube and social media outlets, Roberto de la Madrid actually acted as a decoy for social media in publishing Hispan TV content that was taken off of the official channels. Now, again, there's no research. There's no research validifying this. What I'm able to tell you is just based off of my own anecdotes from what I've witnessed from studying this since 2011. And what happened with Roberto de la Madrid is he actually recently resigned, and information is now coming out about how much he was very censored in his work for Hispan TV, the Iran state-funded network. But just going to his Twitter account, you can see he's a legitimate journalist. He started out actually working with many Jewish journalists for Televisa, which is the most important #1 television news network in Mexico, who also now just recently bought out Univision in the United States, the #1 television news network there. He has significant contacts in the mainstream journalistic community, and he has followers that believed him to be as such, even while he was working with Hispan TV. One of the other things that we see happening with Hispan TV in order to legitimize themselves, and this is becoming incredibly dangerous on social media, is their expert pool. So on television, you always need what we call a talking head, somebody that legitimizes the opinion or the editorial line of which you're trying to communicate. Bassem Tajuddin is actually Venezuelan. but his father is the Venezuelan ambassador to Syria. And he is a rabid anti-Semite, I cannot stress this enough. And he is a frequent guest on Hispan TV, but he is also a frequent guest at Venezuela's Telesur and Russia Today's RT in Espanol. And just to illustrate some of the content that he publishes on social media, which then he broadcasts in his interviews on these networks. This was at the beginning of the pandemic, saying that the virus of Israel hell assassinates to the degree of COVID-19, basically making the equation of the rate at which COVID is killing the lungs to the way that Israel is killing Palestinian people, to drawing that parallel. And this is something that he publishes on his own public account, but he then reiterates when he's on all of these TV networks, which reach millions. Al Mayadin Español, this is relatively new. They claim to have started broadcasting in 2012. They exist in Arabic and in English, but only recently did they start broadcasting in Spanish. This is in essence Hezbollah. And they've started to significantly invest in content in Spanish. Already on Twitter, they have 36,000 followers. And the typical image you see of the American Jew with the pot there that says the deal of a lifetime, the deal of a century. Al Mayadin doesn't hide its political narrative. It says that the Palestinian cause is one of its utmost important issues, and that it focuses predominantly on that. We also have to understand that these networks, they share correspondence. So for example, here is a correspondent, Ahmad Ghanem in Gaza. He works not only for Al Mayadin, the network that I just showed you, but here he's also reporting for Telesur. He also reports for Hispan TV. So we see the same people that are reporting on several of the same networks. But with regard to Hispan TV, it's important to note that they have correspondents in almost every single country in Latin America, and they even have correspondents in the United States, both in Miami and in Los Angeles. The content is key here, and the content is becoming increasingly more important and more viral because, number one, COVID, what we saw in terms of digital, but we also know that the younger generation of news consumers are consuming almost exclusively on social media. And these state actors are very well aware of that, and they have been investing for many, many years now in creating high quality digital content that is very anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-democratic, and that is being consumed by Gen Z and millennials throughout Latin America, but also we know today in the United States. And I wanna, how much time do I have left, Charles? 2 minutes?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, thank you. So the most influential actor in media today is actually Russia. The most influential, not only in Spanish, but in English and in other languages. And just to give you a sense of the span of their media network and how it's being utilized by other state-funded networks, but also mainstream TV that we all see. Russia Today has millions of followers. I think between YouTube and Facebook, it's one of the most viewed social media accounts that there is in terms of news media. But it's not just news. It's not just, they do documentaries, they do different types of comedic programming. They're appealing to all different generations and all different tastes of content. And how do they do that? They actually have their own content production company called Ruply. Now, you've probably never heard of Ruply, but I invite you to take a look at Ruply. So Ruply on its Wikipedia doesn't hide who it is. It is actually a parent company of Russia Today, which is an official Russian state-funded conglomerate media network. And Ruply, here it has 1.16 million likes on Facebook, but that's not the point. Reply is actually based in Berlin. And Reply not only services all of Russia today's different language media outlets, from French to Arabic to English to Spanish, but they also are providing content to outlets like Al Jazeera, CBS, and they even more recently signed a contract with CCTV, with China state-funded TV. And their content has been found to be incredibly inaccurate and incredibly anti-Semitic, but nobody ever calls them out. Russia also owns two other major companies. One is called Redfish, which has won countless of content digital media awards. They do 25 minutes and up of documentary type of video content, which is very popular with younger audiences. And they also own a company called Mafic, which is based in Los Angeles. And they have 3 viral social media outlets. One of which is here, I put for everybody below here. One is called Soapbox. It's on Facebook, a lot of viral content. And one of their more recent posts on July 29th says, Zionism isn't Judaism. Zionism is racism, plain and simple. This is an LA-based Russian propaganda company. And you can see under the word Soapbox, it says Russia state-controlled media. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what actually exists out there. And unfortunately, I don't have any more time to go into depth of how expansive actually these networks are, but it's important to be aware of them because of what's happening. Now, everything that we're seeing with these major state-funded outlets, as I mentioned, is seeping into the mainstream media. One specific case was actually right before the elections. It was something quite new here in Miami, where it was found that somebody, and we still don't know who, there's a federal investigation underway, was publishing for months 40-page inserts full of right-wing extremist and anti-Semitic propaganda targeting Miami Latinos. It wasn't the first time that we've seen it. We've seen it before, but not to such an extent that somebody had invested in paying for 40-page inserts on a weekly basis for many, many months until it was finally called out. The last anecdote I want to leave you with of where is the state of anti-Semitism in the media, in the Spanish-speaking media, is of Julio Y. Lopez. Julio Y. Lopez is a non-Jewish journalist, never has been to Israel, doesn't even speak about Israel in his work. He's considered one of the foremost experts on fake news. He works for the #1 radio correspondent, and not Jewish, also in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he asked the question of himself as a journalist, is there a QAnon in Latin America at the same time we started to see the rise of QAnon in the United States? And what he found was a very secret, deep, dark, anti-Semitic web that started in anti-Semitism, but it actually spread throughout Latin America. And it wasn't the Iranians, and it wasn't the Russians. This was anti-Semitism that was born and bred by Argentinians and Chileans and Costa Ricans and others throughout Latin America. And when Julio tried to go to the social media companies, of which he found, if you can see here to the right, TLV1, it looks like Tel Aviv, but it's TLV1. Oops, sorry. He went to their YouTube page, and they had thousands of followers. He tried to go to YouTube, he tried to go to Facebook, he tried to go to the Argentinian judicial system, to somebody who was actually responsible for stopping this type of local hate speech and type of hate crimes. And everybody said that he didn't have a case. He created a computer program system to be able to track hate speech, certain amount of words stemmed together to be able to determine whether he had a legitimate case or not. And what he found through the program, because he's a hacker, what he was able to develop was that, yes, he indeed have a case, and that these Argentinian and other Latin American type of anti-Semitic and neo-Nazi networks were in fact violating Argentinian law through what they were publishing. And he tried to go to all the right avenues to get it taken down, and they refuse. So on his radio show where he works, which has millions of followers, he called out this particular outlet, which looks like a legitimate media outlet. They have interviewers, journalists. You think you're watching real media from Argentina, real news from Argentina. He started to receive numerous death threats, and still to this day receiving death threats. He received death threats, his family's receiving death threats, just for calling out what you can see here, Tel Aviv 1. This is a recent video that I got off of their YouTube page. So they were taken down by YouTube after Julio made public what they were doing on this radio station that he works. And since then, they've popped back up on YouTube. And here's just one of the many videos that they have, where it's a book called Behind the Curtain. And the author says, well, those Jews, you know, they've been kicked out of so many countries for centuries. We have to start asking the question, why? And so he spends this entire interview of the screenshot you see below going through the history of those rich Jews, which feeds into all the tropes that we know that exist throughout Latin America as to why they don't have a legitimate case for their suffering and their oppression. And the tale goes on and on. But the reality is that if a journalist, a non-Jewish journalist, is unable to stop and even try to reveal the hate, and he tried to go to other media outlets to get them to cover this network of anti-Semitic hate online that he found, and mainstream media outlets in Argentina refused to cover these stories. The reality is there is very little ability to track the anti-Semitism that's going on in Latin America. It has been called out by several organizations. I see Samia Apple on the call. Venezuela were one of the first to call out. The Venezuelan Jewish community and other Jewish communities have been calling this out for decades, for almost more than a decade now, since it's been going on in the media. While the ADL has definitely cited that there have been upticks in anti-Semitic sentiments in Spanish-speaking countries and among Spanish-speaking news audiences, the reality is we don't have enough evidence. We have public evidence like this, but we don't have any studies to back up and legitimize what those of us that work in the professional field have been saying for a long time. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Leah, thank you very much for your important presentation and your assessment of what's happening in the so-called Spanish-speaking world. And it's in the community of scholars and organizations dealing with global anti-Semitism. South America, the Spanish world is often overlooked. So your work is very important. So thank you. So next, David Menashri. And David will be speaking about Iran, Israel, and anti-Semitism. And if you're on the internet as we speak, there's all sorts of things happening in real time now and over the last days, weeks, and years. So David will be assessing a very important issue with regional and global implications.
Thank you. And I'm glad to be on the sideline of this memorial lecture for William Porsoff, and I thank the Porsoff family for all good things that they are doing. As I've taken a very ambitious endeavor to cover 3 issues in less than 30 minutes, I hope. One, to say a few words about Iran, which is, after all, you can understand anti-Semitism and regional policies without understanding what's going on in Iran. Then to speak about Iran and Israel, which is also related to their attitude to Jews, and then the Jews and anti-Semitism. But let me begin by saying that Iran is a very, what I would say, very complex country. It's, Charles mentions the things that are going on in the last days, weeks, months. Charles, they are going on in the last 42 years. And still, Iran remains an enigma. And we don't understand, because there is the nature of their politics. What you see in Iran is not what is really. And what they say is not what they intend to do. So it's very confusing, and I've studied Iran almost 50 years, and I can tell you that it's really difficult to understand it. Let me give you one example. It's not from selfish interest, but it will explain. A couple of years ago, it came to my attention that in Iran, my book that was published in 1992, The History of Iranian Education, was published in Persian. Well, I was a bit first fearful what they are going to do with the translation and how they translate and what they will say about the book. And I received the book, and then translation was excellent. Of course, they removed anything that has to do with me as an Israeli. And my friends in Israel that I thanked, they removed. When I wrote the preface, David Menashri, Tel Aviv University, they made it Cornell University, which I spent 2 years there. And then I was amazed to see that the sponsor of this publication was the Supreme Council of Cultural Revolution. This is the most radical institution in Iran. It is in charge of Islamization. I read further and said, this is the best book written ever about Iranian education. I went to see whom they thank in the preface, and I was shocked. The name would not say much to you, but I'll tell you who is she. Her name is Professor Fatemeh Alam al-Huda. Everyone who deals with Iran knows who is Ayatollah Alam al-Huda. Is the closest person to Ayatollah Khomeini sitting in Mashhad. But as from today, she is the wife of President Raisi. No, they are not married today, but today he became president. So you can see how bizarre things are with Iran, and now you have to make sense of it. In order to make some sense of it, let me begin with 3 issues that I think are important to know when we speak about Iran. You know, we say about Iran, Iranian revolution, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic terrorism, everything is Islamic. What was Islamic in the roots of this revolution? Did the people of Iran 42 years ago who went to revolution, they wished to establish an Islamic revolution? I doubt. I spent 2 years at Tehran University just before the Islamic Revolution. No one will convince me that the aim of the Iranian people was to establish an Islamic regime. They were struggling for 2 things, which is the basis of any great revolution in history: social justice and political justice. They were struggling for freedom and bread, for liberty and welfare. 42 years after, there is no greater freedom in Iran that used to be under the Shah, who was not a Democrat, and there is no better welfare for the underprivileged parts of Iranian society. So it's important to understand that in the revolution, there were communists, nationalists, liberals, all sorts of people who thought that they are going to revolution, and then Khomeini will go to the mosque and let them run the country. Khomeini had other plans, and now they monopolized, I would say, hijacked the revolution. The second point is, to what degree their ideology is Islamic? Well, of course it is Islamic, but what kind of Islam it is? We don't have one interpretation of Islam. There are many interpretations. A leading Iranian scholar who was close to Ayatollah Khomeini in the early days of the revolution, but since then he changed his mind about the revolution. He's now in the United States. He said a sentence that I think it tells what I want to tell you. There is no one interpretation of Islam. There is no one interpretation that is better than the other. There is no final interpretation of Islam, and there can be no official interpretation of Islam. The regime cannot impose its own interpretation and take it to this radicalism that it is today. So there is place for other views, and there have been other views. What I tell you, the #1 Ayatollah in Iran went under house arrest until he passed away 6 years later. The man that Ayatollah Khomeini nominated to be his successor was removed from grace and put under house arrest. The jails of Iran are full of clerics. There is a special tribunals in Iran for the clerics. So there is more pluralism even within the Islamic ideology. The third question is, to what degree the policy of Iran today is faithful to the ideology with which they came to power? As you know, over history, any big revolution, not even big revolution, even political movement who comes to power, faced with the realities of life, they have to divert from their philosophy to take more pragmatic, realistic policies. And that was the case with Iran. From the first day, they said that all Muslims are brothers. There is no difference between Persians, Arab, Turks, and then they started a war with Iraq for 8 years. The name of the Gulf, they insisted there will be the Persian Gulf. Even an offer to call it the Islamic Gulf was rejected by Ayatollah Khomeini. The constitution of Iran says that all Muslims, there is no difference between Muslims, but the president of Iran must be Shiite of Iranian origin. So it's not only Islamic revolution, it's Shiite, it's Persian. So let me tell you that Iran is based on three major pillars of culture. One is the ancient, the dynasty of Cyrus the Great and the others, the Persian culture. The second is Islam and Shiism. And the third is the modern civilization. And they are now competing for the hearts of the Iranians. And you may be surprised that I said the modern, new culture. Yes, people ask me, can the West go back to Iran? There is no power who can take the West out of Iran. It is part of the Iranian culture today. They send that to America, and when they are thirsty, they drink Pepsi-Cola or Coca-Cola. If you want to be rich in Iran, go and sell visa to the United States. This is the dream of every Yiddish mame, or not Yiddish, Persian mame, to have their children in the United States. So I hope you believe, you understand what I mean. There are different impetus, different driving forces to form the current Persian culture. The Shah wanted to remove Islam from the public sphere. He was not successful. Khomeini wished to take out Western civilization from Iran. He was not successful. So this amalgamation of these three will make the new. But what happened in the last years, mainly since the 90s, even more so after the Arab Spring of 2001, is that one group monopolized power, because Iran is a wonderful civil society, the most advanced and active civil society in the Middle East, I would say, even including Israel. Women organizations, it's wonderful to watch them, as long as they let them be active. Newspapers published in Iran are interesting to read until they are being shut down. I gave a lecture some 20 years ago to our diplomats in Jerusalem, and I spoke about relatively free expression. President Khatami was there before Ahmadinejad, that Leah mentioned, and is active in South America. And one of our diplomats, senior diplomats, asked me, how you can speak even about relative freedom of expression when 100 liberal newspapers were shut down in Iran last year? I told him, show me another country in the Middle East which has 100 liberal newspapers, and you go and shut them down. No, it doesn't mean Iran is not paradise. But the strength of Iran is not only because of Islam or the nuclear or the missiles, it's also their technology. And I understand few things about Iranian technology and science and universities. Their universities are fine, they're good. See what their technology, they produce their missiles themselves, they don't buy. Most of them they produce. So Iran is an old civilization. It has an imperial vision from pre-Islamic era. It has this Islamic vision that they have to be the center of universe. They call it al-Qura. I don't know if you know Arabic and understand, familiar with Arab culture. Saudi Arabia refers to itself as Mecca is the main city of the Muslim world. Now they say that Qom is the main city, and all Muslims should obey Ayatollah Khamenei. So why they achieved all this? Because of their ideology, because three major assets that they have. They speak in the name of God. You know, that's wonderful that you wake up in the morning as a cleric and tell people what is the true will of God. But you can't argue with it. They have connection. I don't know how, but in modern technology, they may be able to communicate. Second, they have the military on their side, the Revolutionary Guards. And third, they don't hesitate to suppress their people. The fourth advantage that they have is that their enemy, or I would say the enemies, are naive. Much of Iranian strength is due to Western policy. Not because they wanted to do favor to the Iranians, but look what happened. 1991, American-led coalition destroyed the military power of Saddam Hussein. 2002, they removed the enemy number 2 of Iran, the Taliban in Afghanistan. 2003, they removed Saddam Hussein. 2015, they gave them a wonderful gift, the nuclear deal. 2018, another gift, withdrawing from the nuclear deal. 2021, another gift, rushing back to Iran. And Iran understands today they can do whatever they want. So I think I'll stop here regard the Iranian picture. They sense that they are powerful. They sense that they can do whatever they want. And I tell you another thing. They don't care about their people anymore. Let them starve. You speak about sanctions and economic difficulties. Yes, it is very painful for the people, but it's for the people. The main ideology today of the Islamic regime is the survival of the regime. And they would do whatever it takes, mainly now that Khamenei is 82 and he knows that Raisi probably if he runs for 8 years and Khamenei survives, it will be his last president. And he needed someone very loyal to him. And Raisi, together with his father-in-law, they are the best ally. Another problem that you see in Iran is the regional expansion, and I don't want to go into it, which is a big headache for Israel. It's the nuclear program, which is another big headache. When I come to it back when I speak about Israel. And people ask how far Iran would go with its extremism and its expansion in the region. I have a very simple answer. They will go as far as the world will let them go. They will stop only when they are stopped by someone. Now about Iranian Jews. Iranian Jewry is the oldest diaspora of Jews, going back 26,000 years or something like that. We remember Iran in Israel favorably because we remember Cyrus the Great, who freed the Jews to come and build the temple. And we remember Iran of the Shah, last Shah, who was a great friend of Israel. But in between, Jews suffered in Iran. The best way I can bring it to, or explain it to you, is if you read the book by Bernard Lewis, The Jews of Islam, he has one sentence that is very fascinating. He says, the Jews of Ottoman Empire, when he was in Turkey, he said the Jews of Ottoman Empire live in paradise compared to the Jews of Iran. So you can understand how much they suffered. They suffered because of Shiism, which is more extremist ideology. In Shiism, there are things that you don't have in Sunni Islam. Jews are ritually unclean. They are impure. If a woman or man goes to the market to buy cucumbers or something else, he cannot touch. And if he touch, he must buy it. Because the touch of a non-Jew makes the whatever he touches as impure and is forbidden for Muslims, for Shiites to touch. Jewish children today, in rainy day, are afraid to go to school because the rain washes their dress and make the earth, or if splits of a Shiite, make them impure. The other thing that they don't have in other Muslim countries is forced conversion. There are communities in Iran who have lived as inside home as Jews and outside as Muslims for many, many years until the 60s and 70s, or a bit earlier. Even today, if you go to Great Neck, I don't know who is from New York, and Great Neck to synagogue or to Beverly Hills area, you see that someone goes to the Torah and they invite Abdullah ben Aziz to come and pray. They still use Islamic names. So they also suffer because the world Jewry did not know much about them. They were distant. This was not Egypt of Turkey, but they were far away. And no one knew what's going on in Persia. Our knowledge about them and the improvement of their life was when the Jewish leaders started visiting and speaking with the Shah about his Jewish people. Cremier was one of them. And then Alliance, they established their school in Iran, and there was liberalism in Iran, and we saw that their life is improving, but it reached its peak during the days of the Shah. The Shah wanted good relations with Israel, not because he loved the Jews, because it was useful for him to see us fighting the Arabs. He wanted technology from Israel. He wanted to sell oil to Israel. And for Israel, Iran was an attractive country because it was the second Muslim country that recognized Israel de facto. The first was Turkey. And we wanted oil. We needed friends. And while we could not have friends with our neighbors, we went to the neighbors of the neighbors. What Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, the peripheral doctrine. We go to the periphery, and then we establish good relations with Turkey, Iran, and Ethiopia. Things have changed. Now, with the revolution, everything was changed. Now, relations with Iran at that time were not formal. I once asked a diplomat in Iran, how come we don't have a flag on Israeli embassy? By the way, there was no embassy. There was an economic bureau or something, business bureau of Israel in Tehran. But there was Israeli school in Tehran. There were only 2 Israeli schools in the world. I think one of them was in France and one of them in Iran. There have been so intimate relations. And this diplomat told me, you know, why do you care about the flag? Our relations is relations of love without marriage contract. And probably from his experience, he told me sometimes it's better than marriage. So I took his word for it, that it's maybe better but we didn't have a choice. So we lived with it. Now, and Daphne is with us. Can you have this sentence that I have from Mike Wallace? Here is what the Shah tells Mike Wallace, CBS or something like that, in 1976, at the peak of his power. He spoke about the power of the Jewish lobby. They are pushing around too many people. They have many means at their disposal. They are putting on pressure on many, many people. American Jews are strong because they are controlling many things. And this is the reason American presidents pay attention to them. Newspapers, medias, banks, finance. This is almost anti-Semitic that many other people say. So it is not out of love for Zion, but from shared interest. With the removal of the Islamic regime, everything abruptly went back. This regime, out of its religious doctrine, made the life of the Jews terrible. Because the Jews of Iran suffered in two ways. First, as part of the elite of Iran, they suffered because of the revolution that was anti-West, anti-elite. Then as a Jewish community, as religious minority, they suffered more. Now, they may have not been that harsh on them, on the Jews of Iran, but when you say every day, death to America, death to Israel, speak about the Palestinians, how a Jew in Iran feels. And now what happened? There have been 80,000, 85,000 Jews in Iran in 1979, the largest Jewish community in Asia and Africa, together with South Africa. Today, there are 8,000 to 10,000 Jews in Iran. People left. Now, there have been from time to time, they are trying to be kind to the Jews. And they say, for example, they want to use the Jews. It's the interest of the Islamic regime to be nice to the Jews. They show the world, you see, we are nice. But when they need, there is a Jewish community organized there, and there is a seat in parliament for a Jew. Whenever they want to speak against Netanyahu, they have the Jewish representative, who is better to speak the truth about Israel, Zionism, and the Prime Minister of Israel, be it Netanyahu or someone else. So it is, and then there are some things going on from time to time, attack on Jews. 11 Jews have been executed. The first non-official person who was executed was the head of the Jewish community in 1979. So you add all these things, and then they're trying to put a facade of being nice. And we don't have time to go on further on this, but do I have a few minutes to speak about anti-Semitism? This is your topic.
Sure, it's the Institute on Anti-Semitism, so feel free.
Yeah. So it's, anti-Semitism, to begin with, is not an Islamic phenomenon. It's borrowed from Europe. But they fell in love with this anti-Semitism. They invite leading denials of Holocaust in Iran. Garudi was the first one. It was followed by others from Australia, from Europe, from different places. They're translating the protocols of the elderly of Zion more than in any other country in the world. They have series of movies and television, anti-Semite. You cannot even have a day free of such statements. Look at the caricatures. The president of Iran organized a seminar on denial of Holocaust, organized a contest of cartoons about the Holocaust. I sent it to Daphne, but I don't want to show them because it's disgusting. I don't really, these cartoons doesn't make any good to me. But they appear every day. People are being brainwashed with these issues. Now, it's if you add this, the fact that they are digest, they are impure, and so on and so forth, bizarre things happen also in Iran under the Islamic regime. I once heard Argentinian television was asked to do a program on Iranian Jews in Tehran and in other cities. and they were showing it in advance, segment of it, and I was scared to death because the rabbi was standing there and praying for the good health of the soldiers of the IDF. Can you imagine in Tehran synagogue? Now, this poor rabbi didn't know it. He probably thought it's part of the Torah. I don't know what. And I asked the television, don't show it. Don't show it. These poor Jews, they don't know what they are doing. The moment I told them that it's so delicate issue, of course they showed. So that's for sure. But it's not, things happen, and they are being nice. I was invited to the last president of Iran until yesterday, Rouhani, went to New York. He took with him the member of parliament, the Jewish member of parliament, and the Jews of Iran were invited for a meeting with the president and his representative, the Jewish representative in the parliament. My Iranian Jews asked me, should we go? I told them no. What do you do? They go there, they will speak, and they will show what they want to show to the people. You don't have control of what they will be saying. But, and then I spoke with the Israeli ambassador to the UN. I asked him, what do you think? He said, God forbid. But we are trying to do things to show Iran that we are nice to them. Unfortunately, the government doesn't help us with it. Israel issued a stamp to honor Cyrus the Great. I was in a panel in the UN seminar to speak about Cyrus the Great and the freedom granted to the Jews. When I came back, it was at the same time that Bibi Netanyahu was in Washington behind the back of Obama and gave a fascinating speech there. And there was one Jewish point, or Iranian Jewish element that he mentioned Esther and Mordechai. For whatever it means, we killed them, we massacred them, and so on. So I came back to Jerusalem and I spoke with one of the officials. I asked, who is reading the speeches of the prime minister? I didn't ask who is writing because he writes his own speeches. So who reads it before it goes in the air? They say, why you are asking? I told them. And the answer was, did we issue a stamp to honor Cyrus the Great in Israel? God, when I read the Iranians write, they say that's the conspiracy by the Israelis to speak to the Iranian people behind the back of, and I didn't go on with this discussion because I was afraid that his next question will be, who is Cyrus the Great? So we are not, and that doesn't mean that they will be nice to us. But I think that, let me be fair to the Iranians, there is no public harassment of Jews in Iran. They are careful to protect them. Jews of Iran have been in the army fighting the Iraqis, and of course, there is a memorial for the victims of the war. You can see the president of Iran coming to the synagogue. So it's, again, as I mentioned earlier, Iran is a strange country. It's a complex country. There are different tendencies. But this is a problem that we have to live with. A last word about the Jews of Iran. The Jews of Iran are the first to be thankful for Ayatollah Khomeini. Because after 40 years after the revolution, see where the Jews of Iran, in Beverly Hills, in Great Neck, in Israel, in Italy, in Australia, in wherever they are going, how successful they have been. While those who left behind are part of the lower middle class and down in Iran. So I'm not joking. I think that the revolution did a good thing for Iran. What I am sorry is most of them have chosen to go to another diaspora rather having their home in Israel. But this has to do with our own problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much. So Leah and David, thank you for your contributions and your presentations. Now we can open it up for Q&A. And the first person I'd like to ask to address a question is Christine.
Yes, my question is for Leah and.
Can you hear her? Can you hear her, Christine?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, good.
Okay. So,
Charles, you have to be unmuted.
one word that came up frequently was, you use the term legitimate journalists. And one of the challenges today is that, virtually there are very few journalists who really deserve the term investigative. So when you use that term legitimate, what do you really mean by that? And what does legitimate, what should it be?
Thank you for your question. So it's my own way of deciphering, and it's my own terminology of deciphering between those that work for essentially propaganda, state-funded networks like Hispan TV or Russia Today. These are journalists that are throwing aside their own ethics as journalists for being objective in their coverage because of a paycheck, or because they've decided to work for a particular government regime. Legitimate means, in my opinion, a journalist that is objective, a journalist that follows the journalistic ethical standards of objectivity, of researching and checking your facts before you publish. And I agree with you, there are very few journalists today that deserve the title investigative, but there are even fewer, from my experience, that in my own terminology of legitimate, deserve that title as well, because as we're seeing more and more, journalists are evading their own professional regulations. They're not objective anymore. They're becoming journalistic advocates, which is quite different from being a journalist, a professional journalist. So I apologize if the terminology confused you, but that's how I decide for amongst the many varieties of journalists that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, thank you. Itzhak Moore.
Hi, my question is for Leah. First, thank you for your presentation. It's terrifying. Hi. My question is, you described a huge scale of connections and organizations of that produce anti-Semitism, pure anti-Semitism sometimes. And my question is, if you know or if you have any connection with officials in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, maybe local ambassadors, is there any efforts that Israel make to combat these organizations and connections?
We work with many of them, Jewish and non-Jewish, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and many others. The problem is this is David and Goliath, and we're the David. We are very much the David when it comes to media. Not only because of the lack of an official channel that is able to communicate Israel's side of the story, whether in English, Arabic, or Spanish, but because we're just if you look at the landscape, it's overwhelming. Anything that we do is a drop in the bucket compared to it's not an exaggeration. We're talking billions of dollars of investment that go into fueling these state-funded, these state-run networks, and the mass of content that they have, the mass networks, the journalists. I mean, if you just look at the history of Hispan TV, they've been kicked off of social media 3 times, and 3 times they keep coming back. And they keep going. They find ways to go through the back door and work around. All that takes money. That to invest only in that, and Iran's media empire, the state-funded one, is very vast. So to be able to invest that much time, money, energy, human resources, capital into that, what we are doing from the Jewish community and from the Israeli side unfortunately is very minimal compared to that, but that also requires that the response be significantly much more strategic and working much more in partnership with a lot of the different organizations and government entities and individuals and professionals in the field.
Thank you. We have a question here from Pembroke College, Max Porter.
Hi there. My question is for Professor Menashri. It's just a very short question. Why is it in the Iranian regime's interest to threaten and attack Israel? What does it gain from these war?
David, can I ask you to show this poster?
Yes, yes.
So in my age, we don't have, we don't have, no, not this one, yes. Can you expand it or? Now, the Iranians say that what they want is not to destroy Israel, but they want to liberate Israel, but do it through referendum. And this here, as I'll read you the title. This is the way to final solution is a referendum. Now, I ask you, since when referendum and elections shows the picture of soldiers, military cars, you know, that arms. So they are playing with words. They say we are, and they don't say we are going to destroy Israel. Israel would be removed from the face of universe. So in very delicate way in their mind, they are actually, this picture speaks for itself. General Soleimani, and they want to liberate Jerusalem, and they say that they are doing it by free elections. So judge for yourself. Now, remind me, what was the question here?
So the question was, so it was a big question, which is, what does the regime gain from? What's the regime's interest in this kind of?
It's not only why they hate us, why we are both sides obsessed with each other. It's not only they are obsessed with us, we are also obsessed with them. First, in terms of ideology, this is a religious war between the right and wrong. One has to be eliminated for the other to survive, and you can understand who is right and who is false. For them, Jews don't have, Judaism is religion, is not nationality. Jews don't have the right to have a state, certainly not in the Middle East, and of course not with Jerusalem as its capital. But Israel is a servant of the United States. It's part of imperialism. And I don't know if they hate America because of Israel or they hate Israel because of America. Probably both of them. But there is another thing. Israel is successful. And it presents a good model of a Jewish state which is not religious, not entirely religious. We are going there in this direction. So in any way you look at it, you can see that they have good reason ideologically to reject Israel. But as I said earlier, ideology is not the main criteria for them. They benefit from Israel. By using the flag of Jerusalem, they are making themselves the leaders of the Muslim world. By coming to the borders of Israel, they are showing the Muslim world that Iran is the most powerful country. So if you want to fight someone, fight with someone who is strong. Then they have their interest. Today, Iran because of its animosity to Israel, they are in Syria, they are in Iraq, they are in Yemen, they are in Lebanon. And I don't want to speak about the suffering of the people of Lebanon and Syria and Yemen and Iraq. They're sending proxies. They don't fight themselves. They send children, even 15 years old children, to sacrifice their life. Whenever they need an excuse for their failures, they blame Israel and the United States. It's always good to have someone that you can put the blame on them. So it's a final word, it goes to ideology. The existence of Israel symbolizes the failure of the Muslims in their mind. Something went wrong in history. And these Jews who came from different parts of the world established such a powerful country in Palestine. So it's showing them their weakness. So they have practical, selfish interest. Do you think that Ahmadinejad cared about the Holocaust, denying the Holocaust? For sure he didn't know what is the Holocaust. But he said something, and he saw the reactions, and he continued. So I don't want to dissolve him of any that responsibility for what he says. The Iranians are doing things to strengthen themselves. Animosity to Israel is good. I would say that from Israeli side, I once gave a lecture about why the Iranians are obsessed with Israel, and to a group of people from all over the Middle East. And there was one very prominent in the Arab League. And he heard me saying that it's a good excuse for, it's beneficial for Ahmadinejad to speak against Israel because he makes himself much more important. And he told me, David, when I heard you talk, I didn't understand if you are speaking about Ahmadinejad or Netanyahu. So I couldn't tell him both, but I said, I'm speaking about Ahmadinejad. But we are doing the same thing, and we are doing mistakes. I'll give you an example. I was in a conference in Los Angeles. I try and make it short. 2008. Olmert was the prime minister of the Jewish communities of North America. This still is the conference of the Jewish organizations or whatever. It was in Los Angeles in 2008. And the plenary was 3 people spoke there. One of them is a good friend of Charles, myself, Kotler, Professor Kotler. He's Canadian. He was Minister of Justice in Canada. He's a great speaker, no less than Netanyahu is. And then was Netanyahu, and there was another American. So from beginning and end of his talk, he spoke about, ladies and gentlemen, the year is 1938 and Iran is Germany. And Ahmadinejad is Hitler. I had the misfortune to speak in a session after him to a smaller crowd, but still plenty, together with his Netanyahu's chief political advisor, Professor Arad. And I started my talk saying, ladies and gentlemen, the year is not 1938 and Iran is not Germany. And Ahmadinejad is not a nice man. And I don't have any sympathy for him. But we Jews should be careful not to term everyone that we don't like as Hitler. Is downgrading the historical significance of the Holocaust. We should be careful. Every day you hear about Nazis. Enough. Put the Holocaust on a shelf. Hide away. Don't mention it every day because you trivialize the whole thing of the Holocaust in my lifetime, Nasser was Hitler, Saddam was Hitler, Arafat was Hitler, now Ahmadinejad is Hitler. So what I'm going to tell my children, and believe me, I have a lot of respect and I really care about what happened in the Holocaust. When I got married, I asked my wife to speak with her parents because I saw they don't have many guests in the for the marriage, for the wedding. And I spoke with her father. He said, after the Holocaust, there is no one in the world that I knew before. So we know what was the Holocaust, but you don't have to speak about it. Another small example. When we speak about Iran as an existential threat, is it good for Israel or bad for Israel? What is the message to Iran? That you are strong, we are fearful? What is the message to my children? That they should leave the country the day Iran is having military nuclear power? And I did a public survey. And one of the questions was, what you will do? It was 10 years ago. What you will do if Iran is going nuclear? 1 out of 4 Israelis say that they will consider seriously leaving the country. So Iran is not existential threat. If there is existential threat to Israel, it's from within. It's not from Iran. But there are many ways to speak against them without telling them all kinds of stories.
Okay, thank you, David. We have a question from Ray Shinazi. Ray. Sorry, Ray, you're muted. You're muted.
Basically, I hear all this, and especially from Leah, a lot of the problems. I don't hear much about solutions, and I'm wondering whether, I mean, I think what you're doing here is a beautiful task force to basically discuss this, but I would like to eventually suggest a task force on how to solve this problem, because I think, you know, we need to be as aggressive as them. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that, you know, there are ways to convince certain channels and have our own channels in Latin America. I don't know why that hasn't happened, but it could happen, and have people talking on shows and so on, try to explain to the lay people as well as the intelligentsia of Mexico, of Colombia, of Brazil, and so on about anti-Semitism, and especially what's happening to them by accepting all these horrible TV shows that are being put on in their own countries. So just want to know what's our counter. I'd like to see a counter. Maybe we shouldn't have a counter. Maybe we should leave it the way it is, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. We should have some counter strategy, and I don't know who's. I mean, I don't want to totally rely on Israel to do my counter. I'd like to have it local. I'd like to have it the whole of Latin America, for example, the whole of Americas involved in our own hemisphere here, rather than having Europe trying to help us or Australians trying to help us. I'm just concerned that we are not really doing anything to elevate Judaism as a religion in terms of not trying to convert anybody, but elevate it, that we are really normal people. We're not anything different from anybody else. Yes, maybe God gave us some title, but told us we're the chosen people. We don't really want to be the chosen people. We just want to be normal people. And I'm just trying to see how we can do that to demonstrate that Jews are not bad and Jews are normal people. And we're a very small number of Jews in all these countries that you mentioned. So I'm just trying to see how can we come to how can we do something about it?
Excellent questions. So, and there are a variety of different responses, but I'll give you mine and my personal opinion from doing this a long time. First of all, it may, if it hasn't been, and I believe it is, but it should be a wake-up call for all of us that what we witnessed in terms of negative media coverage, anti-Semitic coverage, anti-Israel coverage, that led to unprecedented anti-Semitic violence in the United States and elsewhere, should really be a wake-up call that we have as Jews, collectively as Jews, a problem in the media, regardless of the language. But in Latin America, there are additional threats and challenges that don't exist in Europe. For example, you have one of if not the largest Palestinian diaspora outside of the Middle East. which has led to an incredibly difficult situation for the Jewish community in Chile. And that's, it's not also constrained to Chile. It's something that's throughout the region. And it's unfortunately an anti-Semitism that we in the United States are starting to realize that exists here and in the media. You're right, we can't rely solely on Israel, and the Jewish communities don't. I know, and there's some people on this call right now that it requires a strategic unifying strategy. It's again, it's not something that any one organization or any one community can tackle, because of the challenge is so much greater than all of us. But what we're working on, and it's a secret, so I can't tell you, Ray, but offline I can share it with you. We're going to start to play the other side at their own game in terms of media. We've all been trying to do this as professionals for a long time, and bringing experts in the studios elsewhere that they need to understand about anti-Semitism of Israel. But the other state-funded networks aren't playing professionally, to be perfectly honest. And we're getting beat at our own game. So we are now looking at how do we up the ante, so to speak, in terms of media and particularly content. And number one, to change the image of Jews, particularly in the Hispanic world, that are seen as the white authoritarian oppressor and are not seen as part of the Latino community. We are seen as a race apart, a community apart in a lot of instances. And with the weaponization of identity politics in the media today, that is very dangerous, as we're starting to see. But more importantly, to start to change the narrative and take control of our own narrative in the media, because we, for too long as Jews, particularly in the Spanish language media, have been reliant on mainstream outlets and state-funded outlets not related to Israel or the Jewish people to do that for us. And I think it's now time that we retake the narrative and start to pave our own path, particularly in the media. And in terms of how we are perceived through the media is a very important focal point for us. And trust me, we're on it, and we're working with several partners inside of Israel, outside of Israel, in Latin America, and the United States, to make sure that we are all working together and on the same page. And the first step of that is actually we're doing focus groups to test what are the messages that will help us start to reconstruct our own narrative and our new image in the media.
Okay, thank you. We don't have much time, so what I would like to do, I'm not going to get everybody in, but Dana, could you please ask a very concise question, and then Matthew as well, just a very concise question, and we'll let Leah and David respond quickly. So very concise.
Yeah, my question is to Menashri, please. I actually heard several times that the Iranian regime threatens Israel with destruction. And it's kind of surprising to see that he didn't mention this at all.
Okay, thank you. And Matthew, your question very briefly, please.
Sure, this is for Leah. How much is people in Latin America looking for alternative sources of alternative medias? How much is that the undemocratic or the state-controlled media in many Latin American countries?
So Leah, why don't you go ahead, and then David, you can respond to Dana.
Okay, thank you. So they are looking. The problem is what they're finding is Hispan TV, Russia Today, and these alternative outlets. We know this for a fact through our own focus groups, polls, and research, that particularly the younger generation are going online, specifically on YouTube, to find alternative sources of news. But what they're finding is not good news for the rest of us.
About the destruction of Israel, I want to be to take the line of Leah of speaking about legitimate investigations and say about legitimate. If I want to remain legitimate scholar, I have to be faithful to the truth. I don't know many statements by the Iranians or any statements by the Iranians that they're threatening to destroy the state of Israel. If you have one, show me. They are smarter than this. They cannot go public and speak like this. What they say that Israel, as I mentioned, Israel will be removed from the face of the earth. If Israel will do A, B, and C, we will respond to them with the powerful, there will be no Israel. That would say, if Israel will attack Tehran, destroy Tehran, they will do. They don't really intend and capable of doing it. What they do is, as I mentioned, they're proxies. They have people, volunteers, they say, they pay them. They have people in Syria, they have proxies in Lebanon. Hezbollah today is Iran. So they let others to speak like that and take action more than this. What they say is what they do, for God's sake. What they do is developing missiles of 2,000 kilometers. They had 1,300, they extended it. Why? 1,300 kilometers is not enough for Israel. 2,000 it is. I don't want to say that they don't want to be, that Israel will be destroyed. They are careful not to say it. And I tell you, the end, it's not related, but it is about this nuclear. I know that in South America, Ahmadinejad is very popular. By the way, about anti-Semitism, it's also in the United States, on campuses and the extreme left. So you have anti-Semitism from left and you have anti-Semitism from right, and God, what a mess is there. But the Ahmadinejad appeared, you know, Iranian presidents can travel to the United States once a year, to the General Assembly. America must grant them visa. So Ahmadinejad, after he was elected, he went to the UN and he gave a speech that not many people noticed in what he said at that time. He said, in 27 minutes that I was speaking, no one whispered, and all eyes were glued to me because there was a hell of light above my head. People who speak like this, whether they threaten or don't threaten, I don't want them to come close to the nuclear weapon. The question of nuclear weapon is a major issue. The regional involvement, their power that they are gaining, and the more power they get more chutzpah. And you see them going, and they want more and more. So yes, they would love to see Israel destroyed. They would love to see, but they don't say it. But we don't judge them by what they say. We judge them by what they do. If they want tomorrow, they can make the life of Israel miserable, having Hezbollah, having Hamas, having from Golan Heights, missiles coming to Israel. So yes, if it was not clear, I take very serious the threat coming from Iran. And I think that Israel is I think we are not in good shape. The Iranians are shrewd, are smart, and they are doing what they do, but they don't speak up about it. They can speak nice things about the Jews, but at the same time, they are anti-Semite, many of them. I don't say all of them, but the regime is.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you, Leah, very much for your insights and analysis. Again, I also want to thank Laura and Alvin and Ray I'm glad the Prusovs were here. Ray played an important role in putting the memorial lecture for William Prusov together to facilitate it. And William Prusov's memory continues to be a blessing for for millions of people around the world, some directly and some indirectly. So it was special to do this. So everybody stay well and have a good evening. Are there any, Ira, do you have any housekeeping statements to make?
Yeah. So